Luna has said we need to take the source of the issue, so that's what we're going to do. Our team believes that the greatest challenge our generation has to handle is educating people with proper human values, such as taking responsibility over what's happening in the world and being aware of our surroundings. Because if most, if not all, challenges our generation has to handle are caused by improper education. For instance, violence, extremism, poverty, and even climate change. Also, our generation is facing many severe issues that form much more of a challenge to handle than climate change. Let's have poverty as an example. According to the World Bank, there are about 736 million people living in extreme poverty globally. Yes, climate change will be challenging to our generation, but much more people are suffering at the moment I am talking to you. Annually, about 9 million people die of hunger. Isn't that a greater challenge we are currently facing and we will continue to face in the future? As a person who has been involved in climate movements, I am aware that climate change helps and encourages to have an environment that makes poverty a wider issue. But first of all, we need to go to the core issue, which is educating people. Otherwise, we cannot solve this issue. I have reached also an understanding that I think my opponents would also agree to, which is if we have more people to care to handle climate change, we must educate them about it. Same goes for the other challenges we're facing. We need to implement the sense of responsibility in people in order to resolve climate change and other problems. So the core issue is education, so we can help resolving climate change and other challenges such as violence, extremism, and poverty. Thank you. I think Michael can go now.
Oh, I was waiting for Steven to do the formalities. Anyways, all right, cool. So, according to the other side of the table, education and hunger are the biggest problems in the world right now. The biggest challenge for our generation, especially education. And this side of the table would argue against that because education will not take away the fossil fuels industry that is now also backed up by many corrupted politicians in many of different governments. Education is a long-term solution, and this is recognized by almost all governments. Education was never a short-term solution, which means it cannot fix climate change, which is the greatest challenge for our generation currently. We have only 10 years to act, according to 97% of all scientists of the world, and education will not be the first action that will help climate change in that. The other side of the table recognized that climate change will make everything worse, and we also stated in our opening statement that climate change will make hunger far more worse and also potentially displace 70% of the continent of Africa and make over 50% of all the world geographical area uninhabitable until 2100. So, and this happens if we go over the point of no return, which is in 10 years. And as a long-term solution, which is education and is important, it cannot be the biggest challenge for our generation currently because we have more pressing issues currently now. We have a ticking time bomb that we have to now break up before it blows up in our own faces. And education actually cannot deal with fix that because it's a short-term solution and it's not going to fix the and take away the fossil fuels industry. Education is nice, but it's not a short-term solution to our biggest challenge for our generation currently. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And Shai, go ahead.
Perfect. Dear, climate change shouldn't be neglected in any case, but other issues can affect the progress of humanity and should be treated with more urgency. The 2019 corona outbreak, for example, not only showed how weak our society is, but it also not prepared to deal with outbreaks of this size. Seeking to be truly prepared to deal with escalating challenge and other problems, in addition to wanting vital results, we consider it more relevant for now to dedicate ourselves to educating and re-educating the human and to make pro-environment practices natural activities, and not forced by an external force. For this, issues related to the lacking of education and social cultural policies must be a priority. If we neglect education, then we would reach a situation in which climate change would be temporarily resolved, but the results wouldn't be permanent, and we would be only prolonging the worst scenario possible. Not only because of climate change, but other issues as racism, poverty, hunger, and gender crisis, as my teammate said, need to be more present in people's mind. We only can achieve this by making them truly understand these topics, and that's when education shows itself more important for now. How would you like to teach someone about climate change if, for example, when this person doesn't know how to read, to express himself, and don't eat for 5 days, for example? In 2017, more than 750 million people don't know how to read in the world. 3 out of 10 in Brazil, and more than 820 million in 2018 by ONU go hungry in the world. Before we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves.
Thank you. We're going to go to the fourth side. Michael and Luna, would one of you like to address a question to your opponents?
Yes, I would.
Yeah, so go ahead. Yeah, just state it as a question, and then whichever one of Lamar Shai wants to answer, you can start answering.
Great. To the other side, my question is two-parted. First of all, our side is a little confused whether are there two greatest challenges to our generation right now, or is it one? Because the opening speaker talked about education, the second one opened with coronavirus, and second of all, does the other side of the table recognize that scientifically, in future, especially after 2050, after the point of no return, if we don't do anything, pandemics like the coronavirus can be freed again because of the permafrost melts, and then ancient viruses that stayed under
I'm
ice
sorry,
will go
the
free.
second part was kind of glitching. Can you, like, I heard the first part, but can you continue on?
Yeah,
The
actually,
second part.
Michael, let's save the second one for a second question because it sounds like it's a completely separate question. So just leave the first question for them to answer. The first question is, what do you consider the greatest challenge? Is it education? Is it pandemics? Is it something else? Can you clarify that for the against team?
Shai, would you like to go ahead or should I answer?
Stephen, just to, can I rephrase the question, because I wanted to ask them both, and I would prefer to ask the second question instead.
So then, yeah, please rephrase it,
Okay.
but make sure it's really one question and not two
Sure.
different questions.
Okay. Does the other side of the table recognize that there is scientific evidence that pandemics like the coronavirus will and will come again in the future and might have even now be caused by climate change, because ancient viruses are under ice, and now when the permafrost, meaning ice on mountains, melts down, these viruses can go away. And this is also back. Does the other side of the table recognize this?
Okay, I can say that as far as I've read, climate change does help and encourage the existence of these like viruses in general, similar to coronavirus, but it's going to be encouraging, but it's not the reason that they exist. So as we said again, I would like to refer to the bigger image. I might be answering the second question as well. Is that proper for Stephen? Yeah, okay. So referring to the bigger image, we wanted to clarify that there aren't two main issues. There's one main issue, which is the lack of education. Since people aren't well educated on taking responsibility over things, that's why many social problems happen, like climate change, like violence, like extremism, like racism, like also I would also refer to how education is related to to hunger and future speeches. But just to clarify, the main issue is lack of education, and we are aware that uh, climate change encourages the existence of viruses, but it's not the reason that they are here. There are many other reasons that also refer back to the main issue.
And can I complete the okay.
Yes, Shai, you have almost a minute. You can keep going.
Okay, so about the question, I'll answer the first one about the corona that you said, considering that I said about corona. So what I try to say is not that corona is the biggest problem of our generation, as Lama said, and it's we're not ready to fight against corona and other pandemics. That's a problem. It's obviously that climate change gives more presence to them. Even if he is not responsible, it helps, but we are not prepared. And even if there's not climate change more, if we neutralize it, there's going to be new pandemics. So how are we going to deal with them? Italy, for example, Spain, they're broken and they are a good country. They are first world countries, and they didn't know how to solve this problem. So we need to learn this. We need to expand our knowledge to be prepared for everything that could happen in the future.
Okay, thank you, Shai. Would your team, Shai and Lama, do you want to address the question to your opponents?
Shai, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. So considering, can I address a question to someone or only to the team?
Just leave the question for the other side, and they'll choose who or both of them can answer.
Okay, so as the pro team said, let me rephrase, about the education can't be the biggest problem of our generation. I would like to ask this. In the US, on average, each person throws around 1.5 kilos of garbage and rubbish a day. How are you going to convince people to throw food every day? That throw food every day, waste water, use their car every time they can, and travel by plane every time they have vacations, for example, to go to zero waste without prioritizing firstly in re-education them.
Okay, Foresight, you can answer that.
Simple. It is not that important because in the future, there wouldn't be any food to waste because of climate change. There's much more pressing issues currently, and we only have 10 years to act until the point of no return. If we teach people how to not waste food and waste the resources and not to fly all the time, how can we teach, what help would it be? Because in anyways, in 20 years, if we don't take care of the climate change problem first, they wouldn't be able to do these things. So the answer is simple. It's not that important. I'd rather them to waste food rather than to have no food and die.
Luna, do you want to add?
No.
Okay, then it's up to you guys. You can have a second question if you want.
Yeah,
Luna,
I actually
or Michael,
have.
one of you get a question.
Yeah, actually, I have a question for them.
Yeah, go ahead.
Luna, you're muted.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just start it again, please, Luna.
Like, okay. How problem as a in like a short term solution in 10 years, since their side claimed in the opening statement is the source of climate change.
I'm sorry, can you say it from the top?
No, it was cut off. Can you restate the question?
Like how like the lack of education will like will be the greatest challenge of our time.
If you guys want, I have the question that Luna was about to ask. Also because she sent it to me. If I have better internet, I just can say it instead of her.
Yeah, go ahead. And Luna, when you speak, just turn off the video, and it may help you with the audio. Okay, when you're speaking. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so this was Luna's question. How can education, as a long-term solution, fix climate change, the climate change problem, which is a short-term solution, in 10 years and no less, since their side claimed in the opening statement that it is the source of climate change?
Okay. Laman Shai, is the
Okay,
question clear?
I'm
Would you like to
no,
answer?
I had bad Wi-Fi, so can they say it again?
Yeah, the question was how can education, which is a long-term issue, uh, sufficiently address climate change, which the foresight is saying is a short-term issue, that there's a 10-year or less window to address.
Okay, so I believe that the proposition has a misunderstanding of that. They think that education should last forever, while it shouldn't. While we are, let me give you an actual example that we're doing currently. And climate movements, what we try to do to motivate people to care more for climate change, we write content and educate them on the process. And at the same time, they're working and asking demands from the governments and from bigger companies, such as what Greenpeace does. They educate people on what's happening and they spread the word. And at the same time, they are making sure that polluting companies stop polluting or make less pollution. So I think there's a misconception from the other side that education is a long-lasting process that's going to take forever. While it doesn't. It is an operation that is done at the same time alongside the challenge that is faced. So let's say for climate change, you educate people on climate change, they start acting to resolve it. You educate people on violence and racism, they start working at the same time, and it's going to be alongside each other, and it's not a long-lasting process that is impractical, but it's very applicable, and it has been done already. So that proves my case. If Shai would like to add anything, I'd be happy.
All right, and you guys.
No, there's nothing to.
So then your team will get the last question for this round.
Okay, just 1 second.
And following the question and answer, we're going to go to the judges. So judges, if you will have any questions, you'll be able to address it. It can be to both sides or it can be to one of the sides, as long as we have an even amount.
Yeah. So my question to the Shai, would you like to say anything, or should I go?
About Michael's question?
No, like, would you want to ask a question, or
No, please, you can go now.
Okay. So my question is, since Michael is aware, and like both the proposition is aware of that there are organizations that are educating people in order to solve climate change, and other organizations that work to educate people to solve this issue, don't they see how we make sense?
I will.
Can you repeat your question? I didn't have.
Course. Okay, so would the proposition like to address what I said earlier on the organizations that are educating people at the same time they're trying to resolve a certain issue as climate change or extremism or like violence, let's say?
I can ask that. I can answer that, and then Luna can add some insights if she would like. Very easy. Basically, the fact that climate movements use education in their process for climate justice doesn't mean that education is the biggest challenge for our generation. If I have a computer, it doesn't mean that I work for a computer company. It's just an aspect that is used interactivism. But I see no movements or no climate activists demanding governments as their main argument, main demand to educate people. Every mainstream organization and movement, their main demand is to stop using fossil fuels and fix climate change issue. So to say that education is the biggest challenge for our generation, and taking an example that, hey, the climate movements use it in their activism, is very unfair, because their main demand has and always has been, and for the past 100 years has been, to fix the climate change issue by removing fossil fuels. Also, according to statistics and the United Nations statistic, the fossil fuel, the main emissions of CO2, 60% come from the industry, the electricity industry, and only 3% from individual human use of CO2 emissions from individual human beings. Only 3% on the contrary to 60%, which means we need to take the fossil fuels away and fix the climate. And if we educate and we think that individual action by education will fix the climate, it will only take away 3%. So if I have a computer, it doesn't mean that I work for a computer company. The demand for of the climate movements is to remove the fossil fuels and not to educate. And it's a foul argument to say that that's their main argument. Then even if you educate, it won't take any of the CO2 away. 3% is minimal, 60% is big.
Also, I want to add something. Can I?
Yeah, you only have about 20 seconds left. Go ahead.
Also, like education, like to educate people, we need money, we need schools. But like first, we should like stop the climate change, because also they have economic impacts. Like climate change have economic impacts. So if we start reducing the impacts of the economic, we can make schools, we can educate people, but education won't make education without money.
Thank you, guys. We're gonna go to the judges now. Would any judges like to ask a question?
I'd like to ask the against team to clarify what they define as education, what it falls under that scope for them.
Lama and Shai, go ahead.
I would like to define what?
I'll clarify.
Yeah, I didn't hear.
I'll clarify. I wanted to ask, when you say education, I'd like you to narrow down to what you mean we would call education. For example, you mentioned what Greenpeace does and all the other movements. What falls under education, what doesn't fall under education? Is adding a law considered education? Where does the line?
Would you like to answer,
thank
Lama?
you for the question. Yes, and then maybe if you want to add something, you can. Okay, so I think we have been a bit blurry about what education is, but it's mainly educating people on many challenges concerning the world. So let's say it's basically explaining a certain issue and then connecting it with the value of taking responsibility and taking action on what is happening. So let's say if you want to educate someone, it falls in all categories of social problems like violence, racism. If you want to educate them on these problems, you tell them, you first of all do workshops on Shai, can you just mute for a second?
Oh, sorry, sure.
Sorry, I get distracted easily. Okay, So anyways, if you want to educate people on a certain thing, you first of all tell them what is the problem, how it's going to be solved, and then connect it to their sense of responsibility, and like encouraging them to take action. So that's the education we're talking about, if I was being clear.
Exactly. Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so what makes people not throw food away? What makes people not be racist or any other things? What makes people fight again, even, for example, climate change, education? We're only here today debating this topic because we have been educated about it. That's the importance of education. Not only about climate change, but everything. When you learn, you can teach, you can spread away what is right and what is wrong. That's the importance, and that's why we think education is the biggest problem of our generation. Even now that it's so easy to find fake information, fake news, and other things, it's important to be educated. It's important to know the truth, to fight against all the problems in the world.
Thank you. Any other judges want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. This is, well, okay. It seems to me that education has been worse in the past, and the climate was not necessarily worse in the past. So, in other words, for I don't know, a million years, people didn't have fantastic educations, and they didn't ruin the climate. So, is it possible that education is actually more education might damage the climate? And maybe what we need to do is go back to a situation where we have less education and maybe a more primitive lifestyle, and then the climate will heal. How does education necessarily correlate to a better climate if you look at the history of mankind?
So this is a
Okay,
question for the against side again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can I start this? Can I start this time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
sure.
go ahead.
Okay, so when we talk about education, for example, at this question, we're not only talking about education that we see on school, for example. Everything goes for education. When someone's born, for example, this person wasn't born knowing how to hate, how to throw garbage away, for example, and other things. They learn how to do this according to what they see, what they read, and what other people around them do. That's why, for example, around the years that passed, we need to improve the education to make this more clear to people's mind.
Okay,
And
I would like, I would like to add on that, well, first of all, we explained to Ron what we meant by education, which is, as I referred to in the opening statement, I said it's education based on human values. So what caused climate change is education based on consumerism and demand of production and the industry that has changed throughout the years. So we can say that it's not the education that has caused climate change, but it's the demand and the consumerism that has been increasing throughout the years. And so I would like to refer to what Michael said and address it maybe, because he said an example of a person having a computer doesn't mean he's a computer engineer, which I think is kind of irrelevant to what we're saying, because what we're trying to state is that when we educate people on, let's say, climate change, we tell them this is the problem. We don't tell them the solution is to educate more people, but we educate them in order to find a way to solve this problem. So, for example, in the case of which Michael stated, we educate people on climate change and we tell them to demand the rich people and the polluting companies to make their businesses less polluting. We don't demand them to educate the people in those industries, because that wouldn't make any sense. We want to take action. So the reason we're using education is to tell people that are working for the organizations or these movements to tell the people who are causing the problem of climate change to stop causing it. Or let's say when we educate people on violence, we don't tell them educate a person who beats you. We tell them to go to the special okay, so that is like my answer, if I was clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Iman, your question, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Stephen, can you hear me? Yeah, my question is for the other side, actually, for Michael, who mentioned that there are the climate movements are not asking for education. The first thing that they're asking for is mainly the fossil fuels and the air pollution. So my question to Michael and to Luna, don't you think that launching awareness campaigns for people in order to solve the climate change problem isn't a very important type of education?
It is. It's an important type of education. Although our argument was that the main demand of the climate movements is not to educate people. The main demand is to fix the climate change problem. As we're talking about the greatest challenge for our generation, we should not be focusing on the other demands of climate movements. We should be focusing on main demands. As to what this side finds very naive from the other side is that the other side says that education is the greatest challenge for our generation to deal with, and it's the man behind climate change. That is not the case. That will not solve climate change, which is the greatest problem for our generation, because it's going to make everything worse. If a robber comes to steal your wallet in the street, you're not going to start quoting him Socrates, thou should not steal, because he's going to steal the wallet. You should either take action or call the social services, call the police, and get him to jail. And as what is the greatest problem for our generation? We have now somebody pointing a gun at our heads. We have a ticking time bomb, which is going to tick in 10 years, and then everything is lost. And I would say that is a greater challenge for our generation than teaching a man not to steal and just getting him into jail because we have now a gun pointing at our heads. That's why climate change is the greatest challenge for our generation. And that is why education is still an important part of climate activism, but it's not the main part. And also, regarding to the topic, I'm not sure how well that question was relevant to the main topic, which is what is the greatest challenge for our generation.
Nur al-Huda, you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so this is also for the proposition. So you guys have said that your main priority is to tackle climate change issue straight away. And one example that was thrown out is that the case of wasting food and products. Yeah, one view, I think Michael said that wasting food and products is fine as long as this person would not have to hunger in a few years because of climate change and whatever. And the fact that a huge style of greenhouse gases come from production, livestock, and so on, kind of avoiding setting climate change on an individual agenda is kind of what I'm hearing in your answer. Would you like to say something to that?
I'm not so sure that I understood the question. Can you
You,
rephrase?
Just
yeah,
rephrase the question.
part of what lies under the education from that, what other teams trying to say, is putting climate change as an issue on the individual agenda, which in part, from what I understood, that your team does not necessarily support. How would that help actually dealing with climate change if it does not go into the individual level?
Oh, very easily. Mainly, all the emissions come from big companies. 60% from energy industries. 77% of all the world's greenhouse gas emissions can be tracked into 100 oil companies. Which means if we look at individual people and if we look at these numbers, the acts of an individual people are almost minimal if we look at the context of these big companies. That is why we need governmental legislators to take them away. Education might be a big part of that, but it's not the greatest challenge for our generation. It falls under climate change because it's a way to deal with climate change. That is not the main problem. That's my answer to that question. Luna, would you like to add something? Oh, and
No.
also to add and to bring up again, yes, wasting food and wasting resources is not good, but it's not important if we look at the context of what is going to happen in the future, because I rather a person to live and waste a little than die and learning before he dies how to not waste. We have a ticking time bomb and we cannot risk anything.
Thank you. Risa, did you have a question?
Let me just unmute. Can you hear me? The question is actually more for the proposition. Both your arguments were extremely strong. However, I just wanted to know from the proposition, if you're speaking about a short-term solution and you're not looking towards the long-term solution, how can you be so sure that in years to come, we won't repeat exactly what we are encountering today? In other words, humankind has caused climate change. We are responsible for the situation we're in. If you don't fix the core problem, how are you going to ensure that it doesn't repeat itself?
We didn't say that education is not relevant at all. Education is very much welcome, but it is not certainly the greatest challenge for our generation. As this debate is talking about what is the greatest challenge for our generation, and it is climate change, and it is the ticking time bomb. Education is very much welcomed, but it shouldn't have the main priority. This is the main problem in our world, because then we might miss our ticking time bomb, and 50% of all world's geographical area will become uninhabitable, impossible for people to live in. That is a very simple answer to that question. Education is fine as long as it is not the main priority for the world governments, as climate change is the greatest challenge for our generation, which is what this debate is about. Luna, do you have anything to add?
Can I ask a question for the against side, if it's okay?
Let's
Steven?
Yeah, not really, because we passed that stage, but we'll see if we have time at the end, okay?
Okay.
Is there we do have time for one more question for the against side. Is there someone from the audience or one of the judges who wants to ask a question?
Can we do a round of speeches again?
Yeah, we're gonna give you time for the closing statements. I just want to make sure that is there another question from the audience or any of the judges for the against side? I just want to give them a chance. Okay. If not, then Luna, you can.
I can,
Yeah.
Steven,
go ahead.
I'll ask another question if that's
Yeah.
okay.
For the against side, okay.
For the against, for Lama and right?
Lama and Shai, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you talk a lot about how education is the solution to climate change, but bringing you back to your main argument, you were saying that education is the main issue because it also, if I understood correctly, because it also solves other main issues in our society, such as poverty and so on and so forth. How does education towards climate change, which is what this debate has been centered on, influence other main issues, such as poverty and all the other issues that you said it would fix?
Okay, I would like to answer that. So as I would first of all agree with something the proposition said, then clear some misconceptions they have said. So first of all, they have explained, Luna has explained in her opening speech, how climate change does affect poverty and does affect increasing the gap between the rich community and the world. So that is how education is linked to, like, if we educate people on climate change, then they would be aware of it, then they would try to solve it, and that way we would avoid less, we would have like less problems of poverty and
Lama, turn off.
clarify the misconceptions that have been said. That climate change is what?
Lama, just turn off the video so that we can get better audio. Okay.
Is
Just
that
turn off-
okay?
Yeah, yeah. Try again. Go.
Okay. So should I go from the start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, how is education linked to solving the other issues, I guess? Is that the question? Or maybe if it,
Yeah.
if it,
How does education towards climate change fix other issues?
okay, so as the proposition said in the beginning, climate change is linked to poverty and starvation and other social issues. So it does kind of encourage the existence, like a bigger existence of these problems or the spread of them, but it's not the reason that they're there. So if we help solving climate change, it would help also decrease the social gaps between people, would help have less poverty, would help have less, would have less social problems in general. And then I would like to clear a few misconceptions from the proposition. It's first of all that they said climate change is a ticking bomb. Yes, it is, but we all must be aware that in 10 years, the world isn't going to end. We're going to get into a suffering point. We're going to have bad weather conditions. Yes, that is all correct, but it's not the end of the world. And our generation would face much more problems in the future besides climate change. So this is an urgent issue. It is, we admit that, but it's not the only issue that is urgent for our generation. That's why we believe with education, we can let people know how they can understand the problems and be able to solve them one at a time, so we would face less challenges for our generation, or maybe better challenges than climate change and extremism.
Thank you. We're gonna go right to the closing remarks. So Michael and Luna, one of you will start. You have 90 seconds for your closing remarks, and then we'll go to the against.
Right. I will
Yeah.
start. Okay. So,
Okay, Mike.
your audience and judges, I'm sure that you guys can now see that climate change is the greatest threat, the greatest challenge for our generation. Regarding what the other side of the table just answered, Judge Randasim, yes, the world is not going to end in 10 years, but it is called a point of no return because after it, there's nothing to be done anymore. And if we're going to deal with climate change, then it's going to cost more than the damages, which is going to be over 50% of the world uninhabitable. Then regarding the education aspect. If you have a house that's underwater and flooding because the tap is broken, you're not going to start a call a lecturer from the government for the local municipality to talk about how the water systems work under your house. You're going to call a plumber, and before that, you're going to turn the tap off. We have 10 years until the point of no return. It is a ticking time bomb. It doesn't mean that the world is going to end instantly. It means that the world is going to swiftly end in 100 years. That's what it means. And when your house is underwater, you should not start to be educated how to fix the house. You should call a plumber, a person who knows how to deal with it, take the water out, fix the tap, fix your house, and then you can live in it. That is why climate change is the greatest challenge for our generation, because it is going to be very challenging to deal with it, but very rewarding as well.
Against side.
Okay, first of all, to begin with, I would like to fix the example that the proposition has suggested. The plumber is able to fix the problem because he is educated on this problem. That is the misconception that has been from the beginning of the debate. Okay, reaching our closing marks, I can now make you see why education is the solution to all problems that we're facing, and it is the most urgent problem, because otherwise we are not able to solve nor climate change nor other social problems we're facing. And we should all be aware that education is not a forever lasting process, but it's a process that goes alongside the solution, and it's the reason things are solved, but it's not the solution. You don't explain to the plumber what's happening here, or he doesn't explain to you. He goes and fixes it because he is educated. You see why education is the solution, is the most urgent problem and the greatest challenge our generation would face in the future and now currently. Thank you.
Luna, go ahead.
I wanted to say that as you say that in the past that was like a worse education than we have now, but in the past we didn't have a climate change, we didn't have a climate crisis as we have now. But if we like, the developing of education will be more and more, so maybe like we will have lots of industry, and that will also affect the climate change and make like worse crisis that we have now. Like maybe in 2100 we will have like lots of crises that lots of crises that we are having now.
Shai, go ahead.
Okay, so by resolving this problem about education, you can resolve other issues and you're able to get permanent results for climate change, for example. The other side said earlier a lot about the 10 years clock. And adding to what Lama said before, if we neglect the lack of education, we're going to delay the resolution of climate change and other problems and give the bomb to the next generation. And that's how it's meant to be. Our main goal here is to debate the biggest problem of the generation, but I truly believe we don't want to have the same debate in the future too, for example.
All right, thank you so much. Judges, please write in who you think won the debate, and we'll announce very shortly. I'm not sure if Jonathan's still on. Risa or John, do you want to say hello? Because I think we probably have more people today. Risa, do you want to say hello on behalf of the embassy?
I just want to check to see if is John still on, because I know that John is participating. So he's, I'd love him to say a few words, but I'll just quickly say, as on behalf of the U.S. Embassy in Israel, we sit at the branch office in Tel Aviv. It's been a pleasure to listen in, to this debate and hear both sides argue a very, very important issue, one that is very close to all of our hearts and one that we all realize and understand has to be dealt with immediately or imminently. So thank you both sides for an excellent debate, very, very proficient on both ends. And I'm looking forward to hearing, what the other judges have to say about the arguments. And, keep on going, guys. You're doing a great job. And thank you, Steve, for putting this together. And for us to see so many students subscribe today is heartwarming. It's really wonderful to see all these young people who want to engage and want to get together and want to solve the most pressing issues that are affecting our globe today. So thank you.
Thank you, Risa. And Jonathan, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, just I was listening as well. I was just I'd taken my camera off, but I want to echo what Risa said. I was listening into everything, and I actually had my 8th grade daughter also listening in too, because she's very interested and involved in climate change issues. So it was very interesting for her too. So I want to say basically the same what Risa said. You guys are so impressive in your arguments, so logical, and your English fluency is incredible. I'm always impressed by it every time I have a chance to listen to you. So really kudos to you guys for continuing to keep it up even during these challenging times. I think even more you guys need to step up and keep that energy going. And I just want to say, as Risa said, from the U.S. Embassy's perspective, we want to keep supporting you guys. This is a terrific program. Thanks again to Steve for all of your tireless energy. And we're going to be here with you guys every step of the way. So thank you.
Thank you. And the judges are still deliberating. Some more announcements. The next debate is Sunday. So Sunday at 5 o'clock, we're going to be debating sanctions on Iran, whether it's a good policy or not. Same format. Tomorrow night, we have the meeting with students from Gaza and a Jewish Syrian singer who's going to meet with us from New York. On Monday at 2, we're going to do Meet the Diplomat with Lisa from the American Center, so with another American diplomat. And we are working on organizing a UN 75 discussion, which is the 75th anniversary of the UN, discussion about the policies that you guys, this generation, think are the challenges facing the future. So if this topic was of interest to you, please let me know, because it's going to be student-led, it's going to be student-organized, it's going to be the first, I think it's the first UN 75 discussion in Israel, happens to be the first digital one. So to be part of that, please contact me, because the students are organizing it by topic, speakers, etc., and that will happen in the next few weeks. So I think the judges still need a few more minutes. I just want to go back to the debaters before we open to the audience, and just want to hear from you guys how it was, since I know that all of you, I think, are very involved in education for climate change and protecting the environment. So I wonder how it was for you guys.
Can you repeat?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious how
Can
this debate.
you
Yeah,
repeat your last?
Sure. I was asking how the experience was. How was the debate for you? Especially for the against side, since I think you do feel very strongly that climate change is a serious issue for your generation.
Okay, so I can say it was very fun, and it was also challenging to think of the solutions. Like the resolutions, my mind is all caught up in MUN, and this is the first time I do a debate style that is different from MUN. So that was kind of challenging, but it was very fun to work with my partner and discuss the things and find like a problem that, like, I actually, after like really talking, preparing on this, I have come to a situation where I'm kind of convinced with my arguments, like I'm strongly convinced with it. So I think it was really nice to, like, it was a nice experience.
I can say that I loved to be here. It was incredible experience because it's very easy to say that climate change is a problem or isn't a problem, but when you start to understand each sides and you start to learn about it, it becomes such a great thing to learn about. Like, uh, I'm not so activist as most of people here, so learn from them. It's something incredible after this debate. I'm surely so much excited to start to go ahead and start to learn, do my part, because independent of it is or not the biggest problem of our generation, we know that it is a problem and we need to fight against it. So it was a pleasure to be here, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity.
Um, Actually, like the experience today was a very good experience, and I like it was like I like to debate, but it also was my first time debating. Like I used to MUN style, and Stephen, I don't prefer like virtual debating. I prefer like going and meeting people. It's more comfortable to me. So I hope also like the situation of COVID-19 will release and all of us will be good.
Okay, so again, you guys did a great job. I hope to see some of you tomorrow and some more of you to debate on Sunday. And please, I encourage you to get in touch with Luna, Lama, and Michael about joining the movement here to educate about climate change. But also, if get in touch with me if you want to be involved in UN 75 and determining what actions you want to take about the future. It looks like we have a consensus. I'm going to ask any of the judges who want to give feedback to just go ahead and speak up here, and then I'll announce the winner based on the vote, because it looks like we do have a majority. So, Risa, Steve, Iman, Robin, Nurul Huda, if anyone wants to give direct feedback on how it was. Steve, do you want to say anything here?
I think Robin was trying to say something. I haven't heard.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to say that although it was very clear to me that climate change is the most important issue today, I have to say that the team that spoke about education was extremely convincing and made me think of other points that I really didn't plan on thinking. And I think you all did a really amazing job. And I don't think any of you are native speakers, and it was just a phenomenal debate. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree with what Robin said. You guys were all great. I do think also that climate change actually is the problem of the generation, the challenge. But you brought up the against side was strong, and they brought up some very interesting, creative points. I think there's I think all of the judges saw good points on both sides, good, strong arguments on both sides. It was hard. It was hard for us to judge. I got it, at least for me personally.
Okay. Risa, Nurul Huda, do you want to add anything? Iman?
Well, going back on what Steve has just said, I have to agree with him wholeheartedly. I enjoyed the debate very, very much. And when the proposition spoke, I was on board with them. The points were very, very precise. And then when the opposition came on, I was with them. So I thought the arguments were excellent. And I loved Lama's creativity with her example of, you've got to educate the plumber. I thought that was very good. It was on point. But I could swing both ways. So having said that, I personally would hand it back to you, Steve, and say, there were definitely arguments for both sides. I think both teams did a phenomenal job. So, I would hand it back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. So based on the voting that I've seen, there were judges that voted both ways, but the majority chose the against side. So that's Shai and Lama. Congratulations.
Yay! Thank you so much.
Again, amazing job, guys. Great
Thank you.
great preparation. And I'll leave it open a little bit if people want to keep talking about the debate, the topic. If you guys strike for the future, if you want to say anything, or if you just want to catch up on everyone's Corona Wednesday.
Yeah, I just want to say something to the proposition again, because like you guys work in climate science, which educates people on climate change. So come on.
Yeah. About that, if anyone would like to join with us, I know there's a lot of teachers here. Me and Luna both work for an organization that educates people about climate change in an everyday language. And we have now material that you guys can use even to educate your own students. We're starting to kickstart this kind of thing that climate science schools that work with us in multiple different countries, such as India, South Africa, Sweden, and so on. So if any of you guys would like to cooperate with us, that would be great. It's another lesson that you guys don't have to prepare. And also climate change, as we know, it's a very important topic. And as most of you chose the other side as the winners, I would expect that you guys would also would agree that education is important and further on collaborate with us. So I'm going to put my email here in the chat so you guys can contact us later.
I'd like to say something too. First, I would like to say thanks again for the opportunity for everyone to be here. We're dealing with such hard time right now. It's been hard to everyone. So be here now discussing about problems that we actually have in the world while we're having a problem right now. It's incredible. We trying to find a way to fight against the climate change. It's a beginning, it's a way to express ourselves. As I said in the beginning of the conference, I came from Brazil, and since I'm here in Israel, I already participated in a few debates and M1 conferences, and it's incredible to feel yourself being heard, to even if I'm 16, even if I'm the school, even if I'm learning, it's so good to express what I feel about the situation, even if sometimes you don't agree with what you should say. For example, for me, climate change is a huge problem, and try to find ways to say, oh, it's a problem, but there's this too. It's kind of hard, but it's a way to learn too. It's a way to, because there's no one right side. There are two sides, and I only would like to say thank you to everyone who's here, who gave his time to be with us. It's a huge pleasure, really.
Just to bring it up once more, my contact information is in the Zoom chat, and then there's also a link to our website if you guys would like to educate and teach your students about climate change and our current problems in the world.
And anyone else from the audience is welcome to speak at this point to give feedback, etc.
I did want to find out more about what your organization, what the Strike for Future is doing, like while we're all stuck at home. Are there virtual protests? When are they? How do you participate? How do you get the feeling it's effective, etc.?
So you can, yeah.
Would you like to go first?
No, I just wanted to tell her that you can stay updated on what we're doing on Strike for Future by our Instagram or Facebook page, mainly Instagram. We have all the virtual strikes there, and we explain everything. And we also have a part that's translating content to Arabic, which I also work in. So we would love you to follow the page.
Right. So in terms of what is going to happen in the short term, we're going to have a massive online demonstration on the 22nd of April, which is the Earth Day of the world, because people cannot go out. We call it the We the Planet campaign, and people should upload to their social medias a video of themselves explaining why climate change is important to them. Then there is going every Friday there's a online strike. Basically, people take a picture with them holding a sign, and then post it on their social medias. Every Friday, Fridays for Future International organizes a webinar. Last week we had a webinar with Naomi Klein, who is the author of This Changes Everything and On Fire, which are books that talk about the correlation of capitalism and consumerism to climate change and CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. And we also had the chief director of the WHO committee, and they both had a webinar on climate change and coronavirus. You can go listen to it on Spotify. It's available on Spotify and YouTube. We have a YouTube channel where we have updates for the Fridays for Future International campaign. And there is multiple different things that the climate movement is doing currently. And there's multiple different climate movements. If you guys want to take action, you can. And frankly, there's nothing else to do at this time when you're at home.
I've got a question for the people that are left here. Is it possible that this coronavirus period, when we're all stuck at home, is actually going to turn out to be good for the climate?
That's up to the people. If people won't have a massive wave of consumerism and everything after coronavirus, it's up to them. Also, during which we have a crisis, the coronavirus crisis, we also have the climate crisis, and we have under 10 years to act. So if people won't forget until then, we have to also take care of the climate, then it might turn out good. But I have my own fears to that. And also, ironically, there is very much and a lot of scientific evidence that pandemics like coronavirus can come up in the future because of the melting of the permafrost, and also speculations, but it's not confirmed, that coronavirus might have actually be caused by climate change. But it's not. There's not a scientific consensus on that.
But I also want to add, like, I think Steve referred to, like, since people aren't in much gatherings and people are consuming less. I've heard it once, like, from a person that in China,
Lama, can you repeat it? I think it was cut off.
In the virus, he was referring to since that people are gathering less and consuming less. Like, for example, in China, there's less pollution in the air, as far as I've heard from someone that it's been on the news. So I think it is like, this is the small good part in this horrible pandemic that's going on. And I agree with what Michael said, of course.
I think the real question is what the long-term impact is, if it creates a change in behavior and in priorities and perspectives, right? Because there's definitely a short-term dip in effect, just like with the economy. The question is, if in a year from now, forget about 5 years, if we're more or less back at the same production levels, or if people change their behavior and kind of their priorities based on this. And that I think is more of like a human behavior question than an economic question or anything.
Oh yeah, that as well, because what we've been doing in Strike for Future, we've put a post a few days ago that said, when you're at home, you would realize that you don't need much to like spend your day or do certain acts. So really, it was focusing on being less consuming and trying to like implement the culture of let's say not minimalism but less consumerism. So I hopefully like I hope people would have more focus on that and talk about it to like see this is an option to live without consuming so much and maybe doing better for the climate. But as Michael said earlier, like the main thing that is polluting is the the polluting businesses and the industry, the factories and the industries. So I think that is a core issue that should be handled, even though we're in the corona situation.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I just think that what you just said, in order to change the industries, if people won't buy what they're selling, then they're going to have to cut down. So I think you're in a really good direction. And I think this is a really good time for everybody to see the impact